Okay, now we will get started for Parshat Shelach with the mitzvah of Tzitzit. And I will share my screen. And although it is not a mitzvah that applies to everyone, I think we'll find something for everyone, hopefully, inside. And just quickly, for the sake of the recording, there are 7 mitzvot that the rabbis consider to be equal to all of the rest of the mitzvot together. And 3 of them are in our Parsha, as we'll see Rashi mentions them all, and Tzitzit is one of them. So I think like maybe the first sort of base level question is why Tzitzit, right? Like what is so important? And that's what we'll sort of set out to uncover. Ooh, sorry, this is like a little bit uncensored on my screen. Um, so we're gonna do a funny thing. Oh, and I apologize, I forgot. I'll change it now, but if you printed the sheet, it has Hashem's name on it. I apologize. Goodbye, Mira. Um, I followed the flow of Rav Tabori's article, and so we begin without the explicit mitzvah of wearing tzitzit, and we will end with it. So we're going to start with the pasuk on which Rashi comments, which is the sort of more general piece of it, right? I am Hashem who brought you out of Mitzrayim to be your God, and I am Hashem Elokechem. I am your eternal God. So Rashi has a very, very long Rashi, sort of unusually long for Rashi, asking why it says Ani Hashem Elokechem twice. And he mentions his Rabbi Moshe Hadarshan, Rabbi Moshe, the preacher or the teacher, Ha'atakti. And Rashi, interestingly, is telling us that he is copying the following from him. I am not an expert on Rashi, but it strikes me as interesting because Rashi often just relates the Midrash without citing. Maybe because this was like more of a contemporary of his, he felt that he had to explain he was, quoting. I'm not sure. But I thought that was interesting. Okay. And he asks a very Rashi-like question. Lama nismecha parshat mikoshesh leparshat avodah zara? Why is the story of the mikoshesh etzim, the story of the person who collected sticks on the Shabbat, right, who desecrated Shabbat, contrasted with these laws of inadvertent idolatrous worship? And the answer is because both of these things desecrate Shabbat. Because both Shabbat and Avodah Zarah are sort of equivalent to the entire Torah, right? If you desecrate Shabbat, it's like you violated the entire Torah. Similarly, if you've done Avodah Zarah, you've desecrated the entire Torah. And that therefore we can understand that the other mitzvot that appear here must also have some greater relevance or importance within the Torah, right? So, right, the Mechalel Shabbat is ke'oved avodah zara, right? Is as though someone who has worshipped idols. She'af hi shkula kechol hamitzvot, because both of those mitzvot are equivalent to all of the mitzvot in the Torah. And then we'll skip down to Parshat Tzitzit, the Af Parshat Tzitzit. L'chach nismecha le'elu, lefi she'af hi shkula keneged kol hamitzvot. Right, so therefore Tzitzit also must be included within the not violating Shabbat and not doing Avodah Zarah grouping because it too is equal in weight to all of the rest of the mitzvot. As it says, that you will remember, right? And we'll come back to that it seems like somehow doing all of the mitzvot and wearing tzitzit are equatable. So that's the beginning, right? Sort of the baseline is to say, oh, it seems like the wearing tzitzit is very important because it is somehow equivalent to all of the mitzvot in the Torah. There is this fascinating Gemara in Masechet Menachot where they're trying to discuss the question of if this is the most important mitzvah in the Torah, why does it not say that you must always wear tzitzit? Instead, what it says is you must always wear tzitzit if you are wearing a four-cornered garment. Right? In theory, it seems as though there are ways that you could easily work around ever having to wear tzitzit, right? It's not the lived experience of many Orthodox Jews today, right? Many people own many pairs of tzitzit because almost no one wears something that would qualify as tzitzit anymore on a regular basis. But in the time of the Gemara, it seems that if you weren't wearing something sort of naturally that required tzitzit, you wouldn't have to wear tzitzit in addition. And there is a story about Rav Katina, who it seems like maybe was like trying not to wear tzitzit. And he was wearing a linen cloak, which is exempt from tzitzit. And what happened to him? An angel actually came down and said to him, Katina, Katina, right? Calls out to the rabbi, Stina bekaita v'sarbala besivta. Tzitzit shel techelet ma tehe aleha. He says, if you wear a linen cloak in the summer and a coat, right, a sarbala, which only has two corners, which you might not have known, but luckily Rashi or Sefaria is here to help us, and is therefore also exempt in the winter, what will become of the ritual fringes of the sky blue will of the techelet, right? Katina, you could easily avoid wearing tzitzit ever. And it seems as though this is like a critique, right? The Malach is saying, like, Katina, wear tzitzit. And Rav Katina says back to him, Amar le, anasitu asea, anashitu anasea. Do you punish us even for failing to fulfill a positive mitzvah? Right? Is it possible that the one who does not wear a four-cornered garment is obligated in tzitzit? That seems to be Katina's question, right? I thought I don't have to if I'm not wearing the garment. But he was rebuked for this practice. And when he asks that, like, how could this be? How can I be punished? He is told that this is really not appropriate, right? The angel says to him, Bizman ti'ika ritcha anashinan. At a time where there is divine anger and judgment, we punish even for the failure to fulfill a positive mitzvah. Right? And so what are other positive mitzvot? Like what's analogous to this, right? We'll see some of these examples later. If you choose to live in a tent for your whole life, it seems you might not be obligated to ever put up a mezuzah, right? Similarly, if you never build a house with a roof, you might not be obligated in putting the fence around your roof. There seems to be a whole category of mitzvot that are conditional on some level. And sometimes we value those mitzvot, I would say more so with the mezuzah, and sometimes the roof mitzvah, right, of the fence, fall by the wayside. And it seems like Rav Katina is saying, what's the big deal? I'm just not wearing a garment. Why must I wear a garment? And the Malach says, no, this is actually a really big deal. The obligation, right, to wear these tzitzit is important, and he should have chosen to wear a garment that required the tzitzit on them. And that someone who doesn't is obligated to the wrath of Hashem, basically, right? And what the Malach ultimately says to Katina, who argues with him quite audaciously, Eila hachi ka'amar le, tatzdike lemiftar nafshach mitzitzit. He says, are you seeking ploys to exempt yourself from performing the mitzvah of the ritual of tzitzit? Like, what is going on, right? If you want to be protected from the all of the bad things that might come along with not wearing tzitzit, like all you have to do is wear them. Don't go to such great lengths to wear these coats and these garments that don't only have two corners, right? Just wear the tzitzit, the Malach was saying, because at times where there is divine anger, you will not be protected if you're not wearing your tzitzit. Okay. So now I would say, right, we have this mitzvah, which seems to be so important, it's equal to all the other mitzvot of the Torah. And we see that when rabbis try to say, well, it's only a mitzvah that's conditional upon what I'm wearing, that the Malach chastises them and reminds them how important it is. Now, the Tosfot that I brought here is from Archin. It's not directly on this piece of Gemara from Menachot, but it's talking about a similar issue. And right, Tosfot, their specialty is knowing all of Sefaria by heart, right? All of the Shas by heart in a way that they don't have to search. And at the part of Archin, this Tosfot brings in the story of Rav Katina, right? And he says, right, when Rav Katina says, well, why do I have to do this thing? The angel says, Be'idan richta anshinan, right? That at a time of anger, Hashem will indeed punish you. And the Tosfot make a distinction that we should be used to now after we've been studying mitzvot. Hainu dafka ba'otan hayamim, right? That was actually in the old days. To kol hatalitot, hi, hayubat arba kanafot, right? All of the taluses had four corners. Ika onesh la'oto shaneh oto lihifter, right? You had to go to lengths to alter your clothes to not require tzitzit. Aval bizman hazeh, nowadays, sharov hatalitot pturin, where almost no one naturally wears four-corner garments, ein onesh lamisha she'eno koneh arba knafot, for someone who doesn't purchase it, right? So again, remember the distinction, right? It seems that Rav Katina had to go out of his way not to wear tzitzit. Today, it would be quite easy to only buy clothes that do not have four corners, and yet Tosfos says, don't worry, we're not going to be subject to divine wrath the same way Katina was because it's not the norm. It's very similar, right, when we talked last week about, oh, only when you daven Musaf is this a mitzvah, right? Only when the Beit HaMikdash is the Shechina actually on the hands, right? The rabbis are very good at saying like we can exempt ourselves at this moment because it's not the way it was when these rules were being written. Right. So now we're trying to balance between maybe in Tosfot's time, not a lot of people wearing tzitzit, and this idea that tzitzit are really, really important. And in Psachim, I think we see a little bit of the same tension because here, right, in Psachim, it says Shiva minudin l'shamayim, seven things where you're ostracized by heaven, by shamayim, not by a court of other Jews, right? So no one can haul you into the Beit Din to say you're not wearing tzitzit. But someone certainly could if you did not wear tefillin, or you did not wear tzitzit, or you did not have a mezuzah. And that if you don't do those things, that Hashem is angry with you. Maybe there's no punishment here on earth. Some of these I think are rather tricky, right? It's not always in someone's control, at least the way that we have marriages today, right? She'ein lo isha is a very painful one, I think, for some people. Or sheyesh lo isha ve'ein lo banim, right? Not everyone can have children, not everyone can have sons, but the ones where you sort of have more of a choice, I think, are fairer. However, tefillin feels a little different. Not everyone has an arm, but if you have an arm, right, you can put on tefillin. I think what the Tosfot is saying is important, that like there is this more conditional moment to the idea of wearing tzitzit, but nevertheless, the rabbis in the Gemara and Masechet Psachim make this an issue of minudin, of being ostracized. It's very important. Okay, so now the question is, how will all of this, right, Rashi and Tosfot and the Gemara, translate into halacha? So the Rambam, fascinating, has two sort of completely separate ideas. And hold on, let me pull up the name of the rabbi. There's like a big question here about the Rambam's position. And in the end, Rav Yosef Kapach who is quoted by Rav Tabari, felt that the Rambam actually changed his mind about this issue, which I think is just an interesting thing to track, right? Sometimes the Rambam is not consistent across his different Sifrei Halacha, and they sometimes it's a mistake, and sometimes it's actually just a change of opinion or change of mind. Okay, so in Hilchot Brachot, the first citation here, the Rambam says that there are several mitzvot, right? And here, these are some of the ones that we referred to before. After going through all of the mitzvot, he says, "Yesh mitzvot aseh she'adam chayav lehishtadel v'lirdof ad she'aseh ota kegon tefilin v'sukkah v'lulav v'shofar ve'elu hein hanikra'in chova." Right, that these are mitzvot that are conditional upon having the items, tefillin, sukkah, lulav, shofar. Right, if you don't have a sukkah and you just eat a very non-satisfying diet of shahakol all week of sukkahs, you don't say the bracha on the sukkah, you don't fulfill that mitzvah, right? If you don't have a set of tefillin, you can't say the mitzvah. It's not, you can't do the mitzvah. But the Rambam is saying you should go chase after it. You should make an effort to do this mitzvah. And we even call them chovah. Lefi she'adam chayav al kol panim la'asot, because a person is obligated, all things equal, to do them. ויש מצווה שאינה חובה, אלא דומין לרשות כגון מזוזה ומעקה שאין אדם חייב לשכון בבית, חייב מזוזה כדי שיעשה מזוזה, אלא אם רצה לשכון כל ימיו באוהל או בספינה, ישב, right? If you decide to live on a boat your whole life or in a tent, it just simply doesn't apply. It's a voluntary obligation, right? It's good to sit in a sukkah. You should search for a sukkah. You don't have to search for a house to put up a mezuzah. Right, and then the other one we had talked about, right? And you don't have to build a house just so you can say the bracha over building a guardrail. So where does tzitzit fall in this list, right? Is it closer to tefillin? Is it closer to mezuzah? In Hilchot Tzitzit, the Rambam says, "Af al pi she'en adam mechuyav liknot lo talit ulihitatef ba kadei she'aseh ba tzitzit, ein ra'ui la'adam chasiv she'yiftor atzmo mimitzvah zo." Okay, you don't have to buy a four-cornered garment or a talis to be able to attach tzitzit to it, but it's not really a reason to say, well, I just don't want to do it, right? Like Rav Katina. Instead, we should always try to be wrapped in a garment which requires tzitzit so that he will fulfill the mitzvah, right? That's what tzaddikim do. Or chasidim do. They chase this mitzvah. They make it possible. We should really try and do this mitzvah. And we should be even more careful during times where we're davening. It's actually very embarrassing to a person, or shameful to a person, especially a Torah scholar, to daven without having a talit where they have tzitzit. And in general, Olam Yehei Adam Zahir b'mitzvah tzitzit, shaharei hakatush gala v'tala ba kol hamitzvot, kulan shene'amar u'item otam u'zachartem et kol mitzvot Hashem. Right, that all mitzvot are equal to this one, right? What Rashi had said, and you shall see them and remember all of the mitzvot of Hashem. Right, so on the one hand, it seems as though the Rambam is saying it's not such a big deal whether or not you wear the tzitzit. It's sort of incumbent upon the person who is wearing them. But then, on the other hand, right, in Hilchot Tzitzit, the Rambam is very clear that he thinks it's very, very important. And so it's a little bit unclear what the Rambam thought. Did he change his mind? Which opinion was really his own? Certainly, if you follow the Rambam of Hilchot Tzitzit, you should definitely either seek out clothes that need tzitzit or wear tzitzit under your clothes. If you're following the Rambam of the Hilchot Brachot, it's a little bit less clear whether you actually have to do that or whether it's just sort of a nice thing to do when you have them on. The Shulchan Aruch, not weighing in on this issue, interestingly talks about making the bracha standing up. And I brought us a piece of the Rav Tabori here because I think it's an interesting way of thinking about this. But I think in general, right, just to take a step back for the non-tzitzit wearers here, this question of like, how much do you chase irregular mitzvot, right? I was recently talking about the importance of saying brachot as a practice of gratitude. If you hear it's raining and thundering and lightning in Evanston, do you have to drive to Evanston so you can go say a bracha over the thunder and lightning? Right? Certainly not. But like, how much do we have to chase the mitzvot? Do you have to choose to live in a home that has many doorways so you can hang out many mezuzot? Do you have to choose to live in a place where you can certainly put up a sukkah, right? So you can always you can eat as many meals and sleep as many times outside as possible. So I think it's an interesting question in general. Okay, back to the question of standing up. Right, so what are the first of the halachot tzitzit in the Shulchan Aruch is yitatef b'tzitzit, right? You wrap yourself in the tzitzit, v'yivarech me'umad, and you make the bracha standing up. The Magen Abraham asked why halacha requires standing for this bracha, but allows one to sit while reciting the bracha over hafreshat challah. Right? That's when you're making challah dough. If you've made the required amount, cups of flour, you separate a little piece of challah and you say a bracha. And that at that point you can sit for the bracha, but the Shulchan Aruch is saying you must stand for your tzitzit bracha if you're able. He suggests that taking challah is a less important mitzvah since one takes challah only so that he may eat the bread. The Vilna Gaon, the Gaon of Vilna, refuted this opinion, arguing that challah is of no less importance than any other mitzvah. The Yeshua Yaakov also disagreed with the Magen Abraham and argued that challah is certainly similar to tzitzit. Just as a person who bakes with a certain quantity of dough and wishes to eat must give challah, similarly, one who wears a four-cornered garment must wear tzitzit, right? You could choose, as many people do, to only make enough challah for 1 week, which for most families is not the required threshold, in which case you would not say the bracha. Or there are some women and men, of course, who dafka go out of their way, right? To say, I want to say the bracha, I'll make the requisite amount. And so it seems like the Yeshua Yaakov is saying the same thing applies to tzitzit. You can choose to embrace the mitzvah or not. There is an obligation neither to give challah nor to wear tzitzit. Both are required once a person chooses to place himself in a certain situation. The Yeshua Yaakov therefore resorted to other answers to explain why the bracha on tzitzit must be recited while standing. So we're not going to solve that mystery today, right? But it seems like the Shulchan Aruch's saying that you should stand for the bracha is signaling that he falls out on the side of tzitzit being very, very important. And some of the commentaries struggle with that, knowing that it's actually not that level of obligation on some level. Okay. Hopefully, sort of to wrap everything up, tie it all together. Now we're actually going to read the pasuk on tzitzit, right? As I promised at the end, not at the beginning. This is from our Parsha. V'haya lechem letzitzit uritem oto uzachartem et kol mitzvot Hashem. Right? This shall be your tzitzit, your fringe, and you look at it and you recall all of Hashem's commandments. V'lo tatur acharei levavchem v'acharei inechem asher etem zonim achareihem. Right? And if you do this, if you remember all of Hashem's commandments and observe them, then you will not follow your heart and eyes in your urge to stray. So I want to look at two commentaries, the Ibn Ezra and Rashi, and then we'll finish with what I think is a very beautiful poem by Yehuda Amichai. So the Ibn Ezra right, goes through this whole idea about tzitzit being as important as all the other mitzvot, and this idea, right, that maybe it's more important to wear them in shul, right? We saw that the Rambam says that, it would be an embarrassment to a Talmid Chacham not to wear them in shul. But I think what the Ibn Ezra says is beautiful. He says, "V'asu lahem tzitzit rak lefi da'ati." Yoter hu chayav lihitatef b'tzitzit b'sha'ar hasha'ot me'sha'at hatfilah. Right? Lefi dati, that Ibn Ezra says, listen, this is my opinion. It's more important to wear tzitzit in all the hours outside of the hour in which you daven. L'man yizkor v'lo yishke v'lo ya'asa avera b'chol sha'ah. Right? Because actually, when are the times where we need to be worried about sinning, right? About following our heart and our eyes and our urge to stray? Ki b'shat tefillah lo yasa avera, right? The Ibn Ezra says the time you're in shul is the one time you're sort of immune. You don't need the tzitzit, right? Like, what kind of avera are you going to do at shul? You're davening. I think it's a beautiful argument. It's clear that Ibn Ezra goes to shul, right? He realizes, I mean, maybe some people daydream in shul, but for the most part, you're free and clear in shul. It's when you're in the market, it's when you're in school, it's when you're schmoozing with your neighbor. That's when you really need your tzitzit on. And I think it really enhances the idea of the mitzvah of tzitzit, that they're not the safeguard against divine anger, the way the Malach is talking about divine anger. They're a source of divine protection in the sense that they sort of keep you on the straight and narrow. I just read this really interesting article about how people do very well with, I forget what they're called now, on the side of the road, the sort of the bumps that when you like start to leave your lane, rumble strips, I think that's what they're called. right? That they sort of like shake you awake and steer you back onto the road. The tzitzit are almost like rumble strips, right? As soon as you start to stray, you'll see your tzitzit and you'll scoot back into the center of the road to where you're supposed to be, right? And the Ibn Ezra is saying, listen, at shul, you're already in the center of the road. It's all these other times in the day where it's so easy to start to drift, and the tzitzit helps sort of guide you gently back into the center. I think it's a beautiful Ibn Ezra. And Rashi here, Rashi has like a cute trick, is sort of how I would say it. But I think it has a nice idea behind it. He says, Shiminayin, why would we think that we'll remember all of Hashem's commandments when we see the tzitzit? Why not our tefillin, right where they were tefillin a lot longer during the day back then? Why not some other thing that you could wear? And so he says, Sheminayin gematria shel tzitzit sheish me'ot. Oh, so the gematria of the word tzitzit is 600. Ushmona chutim, and there are 8 threads. V'chamisha ksharim, and there are 5 knots. Hare Taryag, therefore you have 613, which is also the mitzvot of the Torah. And so when you look at your tzitzit, you'll think, oh, gematria plus strings plus knots, and you will remember to keep the mitzvot. You know, it's a little bit less spiritually powerful or charged as the Ibn Ezra, but it's certainly one that gets taught often. And my husband is someone who really likes to tie tzitzit. He hasn't tied his own in a while because we have 4 small children. But before we did, he would only wear tzitzit he tied himself. And then I think like you really do sort of think about the 8 and the 5, right? And it's like a more meditative practice. If you've tied your own, I assume that that was true back in these days of Rashi, and certainly in the times of the Gemara that you couldn't, order your tzitzit on Amazon. Um, so I think there's this interesting tension between like the chiyuv of tzitzit and the power behind the idea of tzitzit. Um, and not, we see the rabbi struggling with how to equate those two. That it feels like tzitzit are this really powerful tool in our lives, and that we should feel chayav in them. And at the same time, we're not totally chayav in them. And so there's this interesting tension, which Rav Tabori really helps us tease out here. Um, I wanted to end with this poem by Yehuda Amichai. I'm sorry I don't have it in Hebrew. I searched for it for a while last night and I gave up. But I will see if I can find it. It is only cited as one of the poems in the series Open, Closed, Open, which is Yehuda Amichai's poems translated by Hannah Block and Hannah Kronfeld. It's page 44 of that book, should you have it. And I think that it really, as always, Yehuda Amichai, I think, beautifully plays with these ideas of what makes the tzitzit so powerful. Almost like the Rashi and Ibn Ezra, right? Okay, I'll do my best a poetic reading. Whoever put on a tallis when he was young will never forget. Taking it out of the soft velvet bag, opening the folded shawl, spreading it out, kissing the length of the neckband, embroidered or trimmed in gold. Then, swinging it in a great swoop overhead like a sky, a wedding canopy, a parachute. And then winding it around his body as in hide and seek, wrapping his whole body in it close and slow, snuggling into it like the cocoon of a butterfly, then opening would-be wings to fly. And why is the talus striped and not checkered black and white like a chessboard? Because squares are finite and hopeless. Stripes come from infinity, and to infinity they go, like airport runways where angels land and take off. Whoever has put on a talus will never forget. When he comes out of a swimming pool or the sea, he wraps himself in a large towel, spreads it out again over his head, and again snuggles into it close and slow, still shivering a little, and he laughs and blesses. This is about a talus with tzitzit on it, as opposed to a like beged tzitzit. But I just think that idea of the memories of tzitzit, of the infinity, right? Oftentimes tzitzit have a lion on them as well. My sons have Spider-Man on them, but I'm sure there's a poem in that too. Um, Not my older son, he's correcting me. But that there is something sort of about like going home. Um, That is great, Rabbi Eliakim. There's something about coming home to your talis or your tzitzit, and this emotive piece of it. That when you put them on, you might feel safe, you might feel protected, you might feel that infinity, you might feel that ability to speak with an angel, just like Reb Katina, right? Hopefully, a little bit kinder of a conversation. But that tzitzit have a very strong emotional response. Um, I think that a lot of people today wear them to be recognizable to others, right? Even if you wear a hat in the airport, sometimes your tzitzit might come out, even if they're not, you're not wearing your kippah, or you're wearing your kippah and your tzitzit, and you're saying something sort of about what kind of person you are, and that there's like a sense of identity, a sense of home, a sense of connection that comes from wearing them. So, and that was what I think Yehuda Amichai is playing with here. I'm going to stop talking and stop sharing so that I can hear from you guys. I would love to hear. Hello, Melissa. I didn't see you come in. Nice to see you. Um, and I love what Rabbi Eliakim wrote, which is the Baba Rebbe took a plane so he could say Kiddush Levana, right? I guess I just am really attracted to this idea of chasing mitzvot, right? Like that you're always looking for, it's not just that you do the mitzvah when they come to you, but that like you go look for them. So even if tzitzit is not something that I can chase, or maybe some other people here can chase, that there might be something like that that could be inspired from tonight's shiur. Whether you take a plane to say Kiddush Levana or build an extra room on your house so you could build a guardrail, that there's this sort of whole set of mitzvot just waiting for us to go find them. I thought that was very beautiful. Um,
Well, I will think differently when I get out of the pool tomorrow morning and put the towel over my head to dry my hair.
yeah. Think about, not the bracha over the talis, but like what kind of bracha do you say when you get out of the pool? Thank you, Hashem, for giving me this cool, beautiful start to my morning, right? That sounds lovely.
It's a beautiful poem. Was really moved by it. My putting talis from now on will have more meaning. Having read this poem by Yehuda Michai.
Yeah, it steals the show. I agree.
I was wondering all through your talk today, is there any overlap? What's the relationship between talis and tzitzis? Because talis has four tzitzis and it's also a four-corner garment. So,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of overlap, I think. Um, Right, we don't wear a talis all day, right? So like that's a mitzvah more directly connected to davening space, whereas tzitzit is like the everyday person, right? Sort of going to that Ibn Ezra, like you can wear them everywhere, not just in your hour of tefillah, but definitely very, very connected. Some people, Ashkenazi mainly, do not wear a talis until they're married, whereas little boys start wearing tzitzit very early. So I think in some ways the tzitzit could even be like a placeholder in some way for when you wear the tallis later. Um, what did Rabbi Eliakim say? I think Yehuda Amichai was the one who eulogized Peretz, maybe Perez, quoting a quote from the story of Yosef Atzadik. He may have been the only one quoting the Torah. Yehuda Amichai is up, I think, a darshan and a parshan in and of himself, even when that might not be his intended goal. But yes, heavily connected. Oh, and the other thing I was going to say, I feel like I try to weave this into many a class. One of my favorite lines in Tefillah is from the after piece of the Shemona Esrei, the Elokai Neshama, where we say, Mitzvotecha, Petach libi b'toratecha, open my heart to your Torah, Mitzvotecha tirdof nafshi, my neshama should chase after mitzvot. And I think it's just such a beautiful thing to ask from Hashem every day, 3 times a day, right? Open my heart to Torah. Like let me be open to the mitzvot in front of me, but actually make me want to chase the mitzvot also. Very beautiful.
That was indeed a very poignant poem by Yehuda Amichai. I'm wondering how it was a perfect conclusion to this to the conversation. But I wanted to ask, how did you happen to come across that poem?
So I will admit the power of Google is very strong. I was not really satisfied with the conclusion as it was. I think Rav Tabori and I have just slightly different goals, and I am so grateful that Rav Tabori published all of these articles because I think the mitzvot are really interesting, but I don't want to lose track of like a bigger picture to it. And so oftentimes I sort of search for some extra little thing to just put at the end, like a nice little ending. And so I Googled poems on Tzitzit, hoping that someone would have written something beautiful. And it was my very lucky day because the very first and really like first 4 or 5 entries were all people quoting this poem from Yehuda Amichai. And so then it was easy
Uh,
to track down. But I was wishing I had that book. My mother got me a beautiful volume of Yehuda Amichai's poems, but it does not include this one. I went to check last night. But yeah, I was just
Yeah.
searching for something
Yeah,
powerful
Andrew,
about Alice, and that was
it's my book. Yeah. At the impact of Tzitzit, though, what came to my mind, actually two things. But one was about Yosef and his encounter with his lady boss, and supposedly, according to the Midrash, or that when she tried to grab his cloak and so on, that it revealed his tzitzit, and he saw his tzitzit, reminded him of his father, and so then he ran out of the house. That's why he ran out of the house. So
oh.
the impact of having the tzitzit on kept him from sexual immorality and really getting him in more deep trouble than he wound up.
And reminded him of his family in like a powerful way
Mm.
that kept him out of trouble. But I think also, right, just going to those like connection pieces, identified him with his people, right? Like reminded him of who he was. That's so powerful. That's a beautiful element.
I'm also, I'll mention this. I don't know how many people have heard this, that after when October 7th broke out, um, after that time, all of the soldiers in the IDF were running to get the pairs of tzitzit. And apparently the reason was is that there was someone who had heard about what was going on, and he did not put on his uniform. He grabbed a gun and he went down to the intersection that was being fired on by the Hamas. He was badly injured, and then some of the IDF were able to come down and to kill many of the Hamas. But then when they were looking at the bodies, they saw a body and it looked like a person was going to die, and they decided that we're going to have to kill him. And then someone noticed that his shirt was up and he had a pair of tzitzit on. And Shalano. So apparently it saved this person's life. And when the story got out, then all of a sudden, whether you were secular, you were religious, you were partially religious, and so on, there were young men that were running around trying to get Arba vote, and apparently that created a situation that the Haredim, many of the Haredim in the yeshiva, said, "Well, we have to tie all the tzitzit and give this to every soldier." And if that's the case, I mean, I'm not totally sure on what the way it was done, but at any rate, and there were the idea of soldiers were coming right and left to get a pair of Habakkuk folk.
So what came out of this is that the army began providing camouflage fabric, camouflage tzitzit, to go with the uniform. And there was at least one organization that had regular tzitzit tying for volunteer opportunities. And women were coming to this organization, I'm sure a lot of places in the country, to tie the tzitzit on the camouflage fabric that the army had provided. It became a massive, massive endeavor.
Hmm. That's very interesting. It reminds me of stories where, like, your Tanakh or your siddur that's in your pocket stops the bullet, right? That there's like something that feels protective about these elements. And also the identity piece, right? For sure. That Shelanu is so powerful that it identifies people even in these crazy moments. And I would hope, without being too political, right, that as a Chayal looks down at his tzitzit, that he would remember to do what is, Yashar v'tov b'nei Hashem. That it would help the IDF, be tirdof b'mitzvot, right? To keep their eye on the prize. Maybe that's as strong as I'll say it on a recorded Zoom line for Skokie Valley. But I think that it's an important reminder of who we are. Both as a part of the Am Yisrael and as a part of like the House of Yaakov, sort of generally, right, with Yosef, and as people who should be chasing mitzvot in all ways. And the idea that it keeps us protected from divine wrath, right, is, I think, very important. The people we have to send out into the battlefield feel that the strength of that wrath, even if it's not directed at them, right? Chas v'shalom, it should be directed at our chayalim, but that if you're in a place where there's a lot of fire, like a lot of people get burned. And so what a beautiful thing to have that extra protection of the tzitzit on. I love that. Beautiful. Well, I hope everyone has a cool week, not a warm week. Is that right? Sorry, before we leave, Rabbi Eliakim says the Israeli flag is based on the tchelet of the talit. So those strips of infinity, the runways to the angels, right, on the top and the bottom. And I guess that's the blue that they assumed was tchelet in the 1940s, I suppose. But that's beautiful. And to think
That was
about people who, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bobby.
That was the purpose of designing the flag like that. That was the express purpose of doing the flag like that.
Beautiful. And when we think about people wrapping themselves in the flag, right, at Israel Day parades or Yom Yerushalayim or whatever it is, to think of that also as like a piece of that idea of being tirdof nafshi, right, and looking for mitzvot and identifying as part of Am Yisrael. It's very beautiful. Okay, so I hope everyone has a cool week. I think next week's is going to be very interesting. I peeked ahead. Karach is such an exciting parsha anyway, and I think the mitzvah is a good one. So I look forward to seeing you all next Tuesday. I hope you have a wonderful week and an early Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.